I am Julian. I am 28 years old. Last Tuesday evening, as a heavy Pacific Northwest rain battered my neighborhood, I stood in my own driveway and realized that my own father had just handed over the keys to my customized Porsche 911 to my deadbeat, criminal older brother. While I was working grueling 60-hour weeks trying to secure my financial future, my parents casually decided that he needed my luxury vehicle more than a single guy like me. They laughed in my face over the phone. They treated my years of blood, sweat, and absolute sacrifice like a community property fund meant to serve the golden child of the family. They told me I was being selfish. They told me I was overreacting to a simple favor. But there is one massive detail they did not know. I had a premium, real-time GPS tracker hardwired deep into the dashboard of that exact car, and I knew all about his suspended driver's license and his outstanding felony warrant for a previous DUI. And now, as I sit here telling you this, they are begging me to drop the felony charges, terrified because they are facing a massive lawsuit they absolutely cannot afford. Before I tell you exactly how I systematically dismantled their lies piece by piece and finally took my life back, hit that like button if you truly believe in justice. And please, don't forget to let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support is what gives me the strength to share this. Now, let's go back to the exact moment this living nightmare started. The steering wheel of my rental sedan felt like cheap, hollow plastic in my hands. It had been a brutal, unforgiving week. As a senior financial risk manager in downtown Seattle, I spent my days analyzing corporate debt, restructuring massive accounts, and preventing catastrophic financial losses for high-profile clients. I had just landed a massive promotion, which meant my salary had increased significantly, but so had the crushing pressure. My brain felt like it had been running on absolute fumes for days. I had spent the last 12 hours staring at endless spreadsheets, negotiating with hostile corporate executives, and drinking burnt, bitter office coffee. All I wanted in the entire world was the heavy, solid thud of my front door closing behind me. I wanted the satisfying click of my deadbolt sliding into place. I wanted the pristine, meticulously controlled silence of my own house. I am obsessive about order, and I make absolutely no apologies for it. In a life defined by the chaotic, unpredictable whims of the global financial market and the constant, draining, toxic demands of my family, my house and my car were the only things I truly owned. They were my absolute sanctuary. I had recently closed on this house, a beautiful piece of prime real estate in a quiet, manicured suburb with a strict HOA. It was my castle. I turned onto my street, letting my tense shoulders drop for the first time in what felt like a century. The suburban cul-de-sac was completely quiet, bathed in the soft, glowing orange light of the street lamps that had just flickered on against the twilight. I looked toward my driveway, fully expecting to see the sleek, slate-gray shimmer of my Porsche 911 Carrera reflecting the lamps. I had worked for 5 brutal years to buy that car in cash. It was my reward for every missed vacation, every late night at the office, every weekend spent grinding away at my desk while my peers were out at bars. The driveway was completely, utterly empty. I hit the brakes of the rental car so hard my seatbelt locked tight across my chest, knocking the wind out of me. I blinked hard, rubbing my tired eyes, honestly thinking maybe I was so exhausted I had parked on the street before my business trip and simply forgot. I checked the curb. Nothing. I looked back at the gaping void of concrete in front of my garage. It was empty, marked only by an ugly, dark oil stain near the center. I had just power washed that driveway a month ago. My perfectly maintained car did not leak oil. Panic did not hit me like a hot fire. It hit me like a block of ice plunging straight into my veins. It was the feeling of total, profound violation. Someone had taken my property. I pulled the rental car up to the curb, killed the engine, and grabbed my smartphone with shaking hands. I opened the Ring security app to check the doorbell camera. I wanted to rewind the footage and see exactly who had walked onto my property while I was at work. The little blue circle spun on the screen, searching for a connection, and then a bold, mocking message popped up. Device offline. I frowned, a cold knot tightening in the pit of my stomach. I switched to the floodlight camera mounted directly over the garage doors. The circle spun again. Device offline. I stepped out of the rental car into the freezing drizzle and looked up at my house. The porch light was dark. The red motion sensors in the windows were dead. Someone had manually flipped the main breaker on the outside of the house before taking the car. This was not a random joyride by some bored teenagers looking for a thrill. Random car thieves smash windows and hotwire ignitions in the dead of night. They do not bother locating and cutting the power to a home security system unless they know exactly where the utility box is located. They knew the layout of the house. They knew my work schedule. They knew I was out of town. I walked slowly up the driveway, my dress shoes clicking against the wet concrete, and stared at that fresh oil stain. It smelled like old transmission fluid. It smelled like negligence. It smelled like my brother. I walked to the side of the house where the utility box was located. The heavy steel padlock I always kept on it was completely gone, snapped right off with a pair of bolt cutters. I walked to the front door, unlocked it manually since the electronic keypad was completely dead, and stepped into the pitch-black hallway. The air inside felt heavy and stale. I didn't even turn on my phone flashlight. I knew this house by heart. I walked straight through the kitchen into the living room, directly to the large oak bookshelf against the far wall. Behind a row of heavy finance textbooks was a small wall safe. I spun the dial with practiced precision in the dark. Left to 10, right to 22, left to 6. The heavy metal door clicked open. I reached inside for the small velvet pouch where I kept my emergency spare key fob. The main key was in my briefcase, but this was the backup. The one that cost $600 to program at the dealership, the one I kept strictly for absolute life-altering emergencies. My fingers grasped nothing but empty air. The velvet pouch was gone. I stood there in the dark, staring at the open safe. The realization did not come as a sudden, sharp shock. It came as a heavy, exhausting, suffocating confirmation of everything I had spent my entire adult life trying to ignore about my blood relatives. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen seemed blindingly bright in the dark living room. I bypassed the 40 unread work emails and dialed my father. Victor. It rang 4 times before he finally answered. I could hear the distinct, loud roar of a football game on the television in the background, mixed with the sound of a beer can popping open. He sounded perfectly relaxed. He sounded happy. Hey, Julian, you home already? I thought your flight didn't land until midnight. Dad? I said, keeping my voice dangerously low and calm. Where is my car? There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. I heard the rustle of fabric, like he was shifting comfortably in his worn-out leather recliner. Then, a dismissive chuckle. Not a nervous laugh of someone who made a mistake. An arrogant, entitled laugh. Relax, Julian. Good Lord, you're going to give yourself a heart attack with that blood pressure. The car is perfectly safe. It's with family. Damon needed it. The name landed like a physical punch to my gut. Damon, my 32-year-old brother. The golden child. The man who had never held a steady job for longer than 3 months. Who lived his entire life bouncing from one self-inflicted legal disaster to the next, always expecting someone else to foot the bill. You gave my $130,000 Porsche to Damon? I asked, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned pure white. Without asking me? Without my permission? He has a very important job interview tomorrow morning for a regional manager position. Victor lectured, his tone immediately turning defensive and dripping with condescension. And he's got Clara with him. She's pregnant, Julian. You know that. They can't be taking the city bus or riding in a cheap Uber. It's completely undignified for a man who is about to be a father. He needs to show up looking highly successful. Undignified, I repeated, my voice rising in pitch. Dad, that is my private property. I pay a massive premium on the insurance policy for that vehicle. Damon is not an authorized driver on that policy. If he crashes it, I am the one who gets sued. I am the one whose assets are on the line. He won't crash it, Victor snapped angrily, the mask of the calm patriarch slipping. He's a damn good driver, he just has a string of bad luck. Why do you always assume the absolute worst of your own brother? He is trying to get his life together. He needs to look the part for this interview. We decided, as a family, that the resources needed to be allocated where they are needed most right now. You're a single guy. You work at a desk all day. What do you need a machine like that for anyway? Just to show off to your snobby friends? The selfish Julian. You are hoarding a luxury car while your own flesh and blood is struggling to build a family. I bought that car because I earned it, I said, my voice dropping to a low, hard whisper that echoed in the empty room. I earned every single penny of it. Tell me where he is. Right now. I don't know where he went. Probably preparing for his interview and getting a good night's sleep. Stop bothering me, the game is in the fourth quarter. Try being a good brother for once in your miserable life. The line went completely dead. He hung up on me. I lowered the phone, took a deep breath to steady my racing heart, and opened the vehicle manufacturer's premium tracking app. I paid a high monthly subscription for this advanced satellite service, and I had never needed to use it until tonight. I tapped the Locate Vehicle button. The screen loaded, and a bright blue dot appeared on the digital map. It was not parked safely at my parents' house. It was not at Damon's cheap, rundown apartment complex. It was not at any corporate office park preparing for a job interview. The blue dot was moving. It was on Interstate 5, heading south at 95 miles per hour, and it was heading straight for the casino district on the reservation. I swiped out of the tracking app and opened the phone dialer again. I deleted Victor's contact from the screen. I typed 3 numbers. 911. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher asked, her voice crisp and professional. I need to report a grand theft auto in progress, I said. My voice did not shake. I sounded exactly like I did at work, managing a multi-million-dollar corporate crisis for a client. My vehicle was taken from my secure driveway within the last hour. The suspect is my brother, Damon. He took it without my consent using a stolen backup key from my home. Okay, sir. Do you know where the vehicle is currently located? Yes, I have a live GPS tracker on it. But you should know something else before your officers approach him. He has a suspended license, and I firmly believe he has an active felony warrant for a prior DUI. He is driving a high-performance sports car at incredibly high speeds on the interstate. The dispatcher's tone shifted instantly from routine data collection to highly urgent action. Stay on the line, sir. We are dispatching highway patrol units to that sector right now. I thought the worst part was making that call and turning in my own blood. I was so incredibly wrong. The nightmare was just beginning. As I stood in the pitch-dark living room waiting for the local police to arrive to take my official statement, the flashing blue on my phone screen brought back a massive, suffocating flood of bitter memories. This situation was not just about the Porsche. It was never just about a car. This was about a deeply ingrained generational pattern of financial abuse that had defined my entire existence within this family structure. I closed my eyes, leaned my head against the cold drywall, and suddenly I was not a 28-year-old financial manager anymore. I was 18 years old again. I was standing in the cramped, faded kitchen of my childhood home, clutching a college acceptance letter in my calloused hands. I had worked 2 grueling, soul-crushing jobs all through high school just to afford state university tuition. I spent my weekdays scrubbing greasy grills at a local diner until my hands blistered and permanently smelled of old frying oil. I spent my weekends hauling heavy lumber and bags of concrete at a local hardware store. I did not go to parties. I did not buy new clothes. I didn't even go to my own senior prom. I saved every single dollar I made, putting it into a heavy steel lockbox hidden in the very back of my bedroom closet. That college fund was my singular ticket out of a life of paycheck-to-paycheck misery. I had exactly $2,000 saved up for my freshman housing deposit. I vividly remembered the specific Tuesday afternoon I went to get the money to pay the university cashier's office. I pulled the box out, unlocked the small padlock, and opened the lid. It was completely empty. I ran down the stairs in an absolute panic, my heart hammering against my ribs, convinced our house had been burglarized. I burst into the kitchen and found Victor sitting at the table, calmly licking his thumb and counting a thick stack of $20 bills. My bills. The ones that smelled faintly of diner grease. Damon needs a reliable car, Victor had said that day, not even bothering to look up at me as I stood in the doorway hyperventilating. He can't take a decent girl out on a bicycle, Julian. He's a young man. He needs confidence to get out into the world and make something of himself. But that is my college fund. I choked out, tears of sheer frustration and betrayal burning my eyes. I worked for 2 straight years for that money. I need it by Friday or I lose my dorm room. You're smart, Victor shrugged, sliding the cash into a bank envelope and sealing it shut. You'll figure it out. You can get a student loan like everyone else. Damon isn't like you. School isn't his thing. He needs a leg up in life, and it is our job as a family to provide it when he struggles. He took my sweat, my blood, and my future, and he bought Damon a used Mustang. Damon took that Mustang and completely totaled it exactly 3 weeks later while drag racing his friends in an empty Walmart parking lot. He walked away without a single scratch on his body. I walked away with $40,000 in high-interest student loan debt. It took me years of working double shifts, skipping meals, and living in tiny, roach-infested apartments to pay off that debt. Damon never once apologized. Victor never once offered to pay me back a single dime. It was just the cost of doing business as a member of this family. Fast forward to 2 years ago. I had finally achieved some real financial stability. I was building my 401k, I had good credit, and I was looking at real estate. My mother, Sylvia, called me in the middle of a critical workday in absolute hysterics. She said Victor was having severe chest pains, his left arm was going numb, and he was collapsing. I dropped everything, walked out of a major client meeting that nearly cost me my job, and raced through city traffic to the hospital. It turned out to be severe indigestion caused by a spicy lunch at a cheap buffet. But the medical scare did its job perfectly. They played on my lingering guilt brilliantly. In that sterile hospital waiting room, smelling of industrial bleach and anxiety, they cornered me. They convinced me to open a joint emergency bank account with Victor. Just in case something happens to me, Julian, Victor had wheezed, sitting in the hospital bed, playing the dying patriarch role flawlessly. Just so you can help your mother with the mortgage payment or pay for an ambulance if my heart finally gives out. I put $5,000 into that account as a buffer and told myself it was the right thing to do. I was the successful son. It was my duty. And in a moment of absolute, unfathomable stupidity, fueled by a misplaced sense of filial duty, I gave Victor the spare key to my house and the backup fob to my car. This is only for life or death emergencies, I had told him firmly, pressing the keys into his hand. If the house catches fire, or if there is a massive medical crisis and you need a reliable vehicle. He looked me dead in the eye, squeezed my shoulder, and swore on his life he would respect my boundaries. Trust is a very funny word in my family ecosystem. It usually just means an open invitation to be robbed blind while they smile at you. My phone vibrated violently, snapping me back to the present reality of my dark, cold living room. A text message from my Aunt Beatrice lit up the screen. I did not even know how she knew about the argument yet, but bad news travels at the speed of light with these people. Julian, your father called me in tears. He said you are screaming at him over a stupid car. Please calm down and be reasonable. Family is everything. Damon is going through a very hard time right now with the custody issues and the baby coming. Do not cause unnecessary drama. We will discuss this at Thanksgiving dinner. I stared at the text in pure disgust. Aunt Beatrice was the designated family informant. She was the one who always cornered me at family funerals and Thanksgiving dinners, probing aggressively about my salary, my recent promotion, and my real estate investments. She gathered intel on exactly how much money I had, and then reported it straight back to Victor and Sylvia so they could calculate exactly how much they could extract from me. They had an entire ecosystem built on extracting value from my success to subsidize Damon's constant, unending failures. The flashing red and blue lights of a patrol car washed over my living room walls, pulling me out of my thoughts. I walked outside into the cold, drizzling night air. Officer Ramirez, a stern-faced, heavily built cop with a no-nonsense demeanor and a faded scar on his chin, stepped out of the cruiser. "Mr. Julian?" he asked, adjusting his heavy utility belt. "You reported a vehicle stolen by a family member?" I nodded and handed him a plastic folder containing my driver's license, the original title to the Porsche, and my current insurance card. My name is the absolute only one on that title. My father gave him the emergency key without my permission. I explicitly told my father on the phone 20 minutes ago to return the vehicle immediately, and he completely refused. Ramirez sighed heavily, the breath visible in the cold air, and handed the paperwork back to me. "Look, I have to be completely honest with you, sir. If your dad gave him the key, the legal intent gets very murky. Usually, the district attorney kicks these back as civil matters. Family disputes belong in civil mediation or small claims court, not criminal court. Check his criminal record." I interrupted, my voice hard and uncompromising. "Run his name right now. Damon. Date of birth, August 12th. Ramirez looked at me closely, sizing me up, realizing I was not just a hysterical victim. Then he keyed the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, run a name for wants and warrants. Damon, King County." We stood in absolute silence for 30 agonizing seconds on my driveway. Then, the dispatcher's voice crackled back through the radio, loud and clear in the quiet neighborhood. "Subject returns with a suspended license, 2nd degree. Active felony bench warrant for failure to appear on a previous DUI charge. Caution. Subject has a documented history of resisting arrest." Ramirez's exhaustion vanished in an instant. The annoyance of dealing with a petty family dispute was entirely replaced by the sharp, locked-in focus of a cop who just found a real, high-priority target. "Okay, that changes everything. We aren't just looking at unauthorized use of a motor vehicle anymore. We have a wanted felon driving a high-performance sports car on a suspended license. Where exactly is he right now?" I held up my phone, showing him the live satellite map. "He is currently stationary. He exited the highway 5 minutes ago. He is in the parking lot of the liquor barn on 88th Street. Get in the front seat," Ramirez ordered, throwing open the heavy cruiser door. "Keep that app open and the screen bright. You guide us in. But I am warning you right now, son, once we initiate this felony stop, you cannot back out just because he shares your blood. If we go all the way." "I have absolutely no intention of backing out," I said, climbing into the heavy passenger seat of the police cruiser. The smell of stale coffee, industrial antibacterial cleaner, and old adrenaline filled the cabin. We drove fast through the dark streets, the sirens completely off to maintain the element of surprise. I watched the blue dot pulse on my screen, inching closer and closer. I was about to drop a massive bomb on my family, but I had absolutely no idea just how catastrophic the blast radius was actually going to be. We pulled into the dark, pothole-riddled parking lot of the liquor barn. It was a rundown, incredibly seedy establishment surrounded by abandoned commercial warehouses and chain-link fences. The neon sign buzzed loudly in the damp air, casting long, ugly shadows across the wet pavement. Ramirez killed the headlights of the cruiser as we rolled to a silent stop at the far edge of the lot, concealed in the darkness. And there it was, my slate-gray Porsche 911 Carrera, gleaming under the flickering, cheap neon lights. It looked entirely alien in this filthy environment, like a flawless diamond dropped into a muddy, trash-filled gutter. And worse, it was parked diagonally across 2 clearly marked handicap spaces, right in front of the main glass doors. Damon was leaning casually against the driver's side door. He was wearing a faded, oversized hoodie and baggy jeans. He was laughing loudly into his cell phone, his voice carrying across the empty lot. He had a lit cigarette in his right hand. As I watched from the darkness of the police cruiser, my stomach turned to solid, heavy stone. He casually flicked his cigarette ash directly onto the pristine, hand-polished paint of my hood. I felt a surge of pure, unfiltered, blinding rage that I had never experienced in my entire life. He was treating the ultimate symbol of my relentless hard work, my late nights, and my financial sacrifice like a cheap, disposable ashtray. "That is him," I said to Ramirez, pointing through the rain-streaked windshield. "And that is my car." "He's smoking right on the paint job," Ramirez noted, shaking his head in disgust, recognizing a man who had absolutely zero respect for anything. "All right, stay in the vehicle until I secure the scene. Do not step out until I give you the all-clear." Ramirez threw his door open and hit the emergency light bar. The police cruiser erupted in a blinding, chaotic display of red and blue strobes that lit up the entire parking lot, reflecting off the puddles and the glass storefront. He hit the siren for a split second, a sharp, deafening chirp that cut through the night like a knife. Damon flinched violently. He dropped his phone and his cigarette onto the wet asphalt. But he did not put his hands up in the air. He squinted into the glaring police lights, putting a hand over his eyes, looking incredibly annoyed rather than afraid. He looked like a man who was used to talking his way out of consequences. "Police!" Ramirez shouted, using the heavy cruiser door as a ballistic shield, his right hand resting firmly on his holstered weapon. "Step away from the vehicle right now. Let me see your hands. Put them where I can see them." "Whoa, whoa, relax, man," Damon yelled back, his voice dripping with that arrogant, deeply entitled attitude I despised so deeply. "I'm just buying a bottle of tequila. What is your problem? I didn't do anything wrong. Step away from the vehicle and place your hands flat on the hood. Do it now. This is absolute harassment," Damon shouted, though he slowly took a step away from the door, his hands raised in mock surrender. "My dad owns this car. You can call him right now. Victor. He is a respected man. He will tell you I have full permission to be driving this." I could not sit there in the passenger seat and listen to him lie. I could not sit there and listen to him use Victor's name as a bulletproof shield for his criminal behavior. I pushed the heavy passenger door open and stepped out into the strobing lights, the cold rain hitting my face. Damon saw movement. He looked past Officer Ramirez and locked eyes with me. His arrogant expression vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of pure, ugly, unfiltered fury. "Julian," he sputtered, completely bewildered, his brain struggling to process why I was stepping out of a cop car. "You called the cops on me? Are you completely out of your mind? Over a car? You stole my car." "Damon," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the tension in the parking lot. "And you do not have a valid driver's license. You have a warrant. It is a family car, you selfish prick," he screamed, his face turning red. He took an aggressive step toward me, his fists clenched tight. "Back up right now," Ramirez roared, advancing quickly on him, closing the distance in 3 long strides. "He is my brother," Damon yelled at the officer, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You absolute bastard. Dad said I could take it. You are seriously having your own brother arrested over a simple joyride? I have an interview tomorrow. You are ruining my life." "You are at a liquor store, Damon," I yelled back. "Is your big regional manager interview with Jose Cuervo? Were you going to gamble your sign-on bonus at the casino tonight?" Damon lunged forward in pure, unadulterated frustration, kicking the front tire of my Porsche with his heavy steel-toed boot. That was the absolute limit. Ramirez moved with terrifying practice speed. He grabbed Damon by the wrist, spun him around violently, and slammed him chest-first against the rough brick wall of the liquor store, thankfully keeping him far away from the delicate paint of my car. Click, click. The sound of the heavy steel handcuffs locking securely into place was the most beautiful, satisfying sound I had heard in years. It echoed off the brick walls with absolute finality. "You are under arrest for grand theft auto and driving on a suspended license," Ramirez stated calmly, reciting the charges as he patted Damon down for weapons. As Ramirez marched a struggling, cursing Damon toward the back of the cruiser, Damon did not look apologetic. He did not look like a man who realized he had made a mistake. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "Dad is going to absolutely destroy you for this," Damon hissed, spitting the words at me as he was shoved downward. "You are dead to this family. You hear me? You are dead." Ramirez shoved him into the hard plastic back seat and slammed the door shut, cutting off his tirade. I walked slowly over to my Porsche. I picked up the filthy cigarette, but he had dropped. I took out a microfiber cloth I always kept in my coat pocket and carefully, gently wiped the smear of ash off the hood. "You good to drive it back home?" Ramirez asked, walking over to me, handing me a business card with a case number scrawled on the back. "Yes," I said, taking a deep breath, the adrenaline slowly leaving my system. "Thank you, officer. Truly." When I finally pulled into my garage and locked the heavy door behind me, the house was silent, but my digital world was exploding. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a tall glass of cold water, and set my phone face up on the granite counter. It was vibrating so violently and consistently that it was actually moving in slow circles across the smooth stone surface. I had 42 missed calls, a relentless, unceasing barrage of text messages from my mother, my father, Aunt Beatrice, and even cousins I hadn't spoken to since a funeral 5 years ago. "Mom, Damon is in a holding cell, a cold, concrete cell with criminals. He is claustrophobic. How can you possibly sleep tonight knowing your own brother is suffering? Dad, if you do not call the police and drop these charges by tomorrow morning, do not bother coming to Thanksgiving dinner. Do not bother calling yourself my son. You are permanently disowned. I will take you out of the will." Disowned. Out of the will. I stared at the words. It felt like a completely hollow threat from a man who had absolutely no leverage left, and certainly no inheritance to pass down. You cannot disown the only person in the family who actually has a positive net worth and a career. Then, a new text from Sylvia popped up on the screen, and it made me pause, my thumb hovering over the screen. "Mom, Dad is holding his chest right now. His arm is going numb. He is taking his emergency pills and sweating profusely. You are going to give him a fatal heart attack. I hope you are happy with what you have done to this family." The old version of Julian would have panicked completely. The old version of me would have rushed over to their house in the middle of the night, begged for forgiveness on my knees, and paid whatever exorbitant bail Damon needed just to keep the peace and keep my father alive. Instead, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen and remembered the phone call from earlier. I remembered Victor laughing dismissively, chewing on snacks while watching a football game, not caring for a single second about my feelings, my property, or my boundaries. I picked up the phone and typed back exactly one sentence. "If he is having a heart attack, call an ambulance immediately. Do not call me." I put my phone on Do Not Disturb mode, effectively silencing the storm. The war had officially started, and I needed to be fully prepared for the morning. Because I knew my family better than anyone. They didn't just want my car for a simple joyride to a casino. There was a desperate reason Damon needed a vehicle so badly, and there was a massive financial reason Victor was so quick to hand over my keys. I opened my laptop. The blue light washed over my face. It was time to follow the money, and I knew exactly where to look to find the bodies they had buried. The next morning, I called into my corporate office and took a formal sick day. It was literally the first sick day I had taken in 4 years, but I needed absolute, undivided focus. I made a massive pot of strong black coffee and sat down at my home office desk, surrounded by my dual monitors. I needed immediate access to public court records, but the standard county portal was under maintenance. I picked up my phone and called Nadia, a senior data analyst at my firm and one of the very few people in this world I genuinely trusted. I gave her a brief, professional rundown of the nightmare that had unfolded the night before. "Give me exactly 10 minutes, Nadia said, her tone shifting instantly into pure business mode. I could hear her mechanical keyboard clacking furiously in the background. "I will pull every single legal and financial document filed under your parents' and brothers' names in the state of Washington for the last 2 years. 15 minutes later, a highly encrypted file dropped into my secure inbox. I entered the password, opened the zip file, and started reading through the dense legalese. I fully expected to see the details of Damon's old DUI warrant and maybe some unpaid parking tickets. What I did not expect to see was a massive civil lawsuit filed directly against my mother, Sylvia, dated just 3 weeks ago. Plaintiff, Prime Mutual Insurance Company. Defendant, Sylvia and Damon. Cause of action, subrogation for severe property damage. Amount sought, $14,500. I stared at the glowing screen, the missing pieces of the puzzle snapping together with terrifying clarity. A month ago, Sylvia had called me, sobbing, complaining that her sedan was in the shop for a massive transmission failure that would take weeks to fix. It was a complete lie. Damon had been driving her car. He had crashed it, completely totaling her vehicle and causing severe structural damage to another driver's SUV. Because Damon was legally listed as an excluded driver on her insurance policy due to his extensive criminal record, the insurance company entirely denied the claim. Now, through the process of subrogation, they were suing Sylvia personally for the $14,000 in damages she owed the other driver. She did not have a car in the shop. She had no car at all. That is exactly why they desperately needed my Porsche. They were fully prepared to let a suspended, uninsured, reckless driver commute daily in my $130,000 asset. If he crashed my car, my insurance would instantly deny the claim, and I would be the one bankrupted by a massive lawsuit. They were entirely willing to sacrifice my entire financial future, my career, my savings, and my credit score just to cover up his mistakes. But there was still another puzzle piece missing. The insurance lawsuit explained the desperate need for a car, but it did not explain the sheer financial desperation I could smell on them. It didn't explain the panic. I grabbed my keys, got into my Porsche, and drove straight to my local bank branch. I walked up to the teller window. Fiona, a woman I had known for years who handled my personal and business accounts, looked up and seemed incredibly nervous. "Julian," she said softly, glancing around the lobby. "I heard some rumors in the neighborhood. Is everything okay?" "Fiona, I need a complete, detailed transaction history for the joint emergency account ending in 442, I said, sliding my driver's license across the polished counter. She typed quietly, her eyes darting nervously between her monitor and my face. She printed the official statement, stamped it, and handed the crisp papers to me. I looked at the bold number at the very bottom of the page. Balance, $0.12. My entire $5,000 emergency fund was gone, evaporated. I scanned the detailed withdrawal history, my blood running cold. 3 weeks ago, the exact same week Damon had crashed Sylvia's car, the entire $5,000 was withdrawn in a single transaction. But it was not paid to a hospital for Victor's heart medication. It wasn't paid to a mechanic. The transaction explicitly read, "Wire transfer to King County bail bonds." Victor had not used my money to save his own life. He had stolen my emergency fund to bail Damon out of jail for another arrest they had kept entirely secret from me. They had looted my safety net to keep the golden child out of a prison cell, and then lied to my face about a fake heart attack to cover their tracks. I felt a cold, diamond-hard resolve settle deep in my chest. This was not just bad parenting anymore. This was not just toxic favoritism. This was systematic financial predation, and I was the prey. They viewed me not as a son, but as an endless line of credit. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a new text message from Sylvia. The tone had shifted entirely from screaming anger to a sickening, desperate manipulation. "Mom, Julian, honey, we really need to talk. No more fighting. Just family. Please come over for dinner on Friday evening. I am making your absolute favorite pot roast. Let's resolve all this ugliness before Damon's arraignment hearing on Monday. Bring the legal papers to drop the charges, and we can move forward and heal." It was a blatant, obvious trap. They were gathering the clan to corner me. They planned to gang up on me with fake tears, overwhelming guilt, and extreme family pressure to force me to recant my official statement to the police. They wanted me to submit, to fall back in line, and to keep paying for Damon's life. Perfect. I typed back a single sentence. "I will be there at 6 p.m. I left the bank and drove straight to a local corporate print shop. I spent the next 2 hours organizing every single piece of evidence. I bought 3 heavy-duty professional binders. I labeled them meticulously. I highlighted the lies, the dates, and the amounts in bright neon yellow. I printed the insurance lawsuit detailing the totaled car. I printed the bank statement proving the theft for the bail bond. I printed the GPS tracking logs proving Damon was heading to a casino, not a job interview. I was building a watertight, undeniable case. If they wanted to play family court in their living room, that was absolutely fine by me. But I was no longer going to play the role of the defendant. I was going to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Friday evening arrived. I dressed in a sharp, tailored black blazer, my corporate armor. I packed the 3 heavy binders into my leather briefcase. As I drove toward my parents' house, the sky was dark gray and heavy with freezing rain. I knew exactly what was waiting for me behind their front door. They thought I was coming to surrender. They thought I was still the obedient, pathetic ATM, desperate for their conditional love and approval. They had absolutely no idea that they had just invited an auditor into the lion's den. The drive to my parents' house took 45 minutes, but sitting behind the wheel of that generic rental sedan, it felt like a grueling march to an executioner's block. The Pacific Northwest rain had turned into a relentless, freezing downpour, slicking the dark suburban roads and blurring the headlights of oncoming traffic. The rhythmic thumping of the windshield wipers was the only sound keeping me grounded in reality. I gripped the leather steering wheel tightly, my mind replaying every single piece of financial evidence tucked safely inside the heavy leather briefcase resting on the passenger seat beside me. I pulled onto their familiar street and slowed down, letting the rental car creep along the curb. Their house was a mid-sized colonial, the kind with pristine vinyl siding, perfectly symmetrical windows, and a manicured lawn that did a fantastic job of hiding the absolute rot inside the walls. The driveway was completely packed, exactly as I had anticipated. I recognized my father's old, rusting pickup truck. I recognized the cheap rental sedan my mother was currently driving. But there were 2 other vehicles parked aggressively on the street, taking up the space in front of the mailbox. One was a heavy-duty, customized pickup truck belonging to my Uncle Oscar. Oscar was Victor's younger brother. He was a highly successful commercial contractor, a man who built a small fortune in real estate and prided himself on old-school family values and brute force intimidation. The other vehicle was a pristine, silver Lexus belonging to my Aunt Beatrice. I parked the rental car halfway down the street, turned off the engine, and just sat there in the dark for a moment. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. They had called in the cavalry. They had summoned the extended family to act as a tribunal, a physical wall of guilt meant to crush me into total submission. They honestly believed that if Uncle Oscar glared at me with his imposing stature, and Aunt Beatrice shamed me with her sharp tongue, I would crumble exactly like I did when I was an insecure teenager. They fully expected that I was walking in there tonight to beg for forgiveness on my knees for having my brother arrested. They thought I was coming to write a check. I grabbed the thick leather briefcase. It weighed at least 10 pounds with all the documents, court filings, and printed satellite data. Felt like a weapon. I walked up the concrete driveway, the freezing rain soaking right through the shoulders of my tailored blazer. I stepped onto the covered front porch. I did not bother ringing the doorbell. I took the spare key from my pocket, the original brass key I had never surrendered, and unlocked the front door. The immediate smell hit me like a physical wall the second I stepped over the threshold. It was the rich, savory scent of slow-cooked pot roast, roasted onions, and fresh baking bread. It was the exact smell of every childhood Thanksgiving dinner, every Sunday family gathering, every holiday where we pretended to be normal. It was the calculated smell of comfort. And right now it made my stomach turn completely over. It was bait. I stepped into the dimly lit foyer, shook the rain from my coat, and closed the heavy oak door behind me. The house was dead silent. I walked slowly down the hallway and into the living room. They were all there, arranged perfectly like a grand jury waiting to pass down a sentence on a disobedient defendant. Victor was sitting in his large leather recliner in the center of the room. He had his right arm entirely wrapped in a medical sling, playing the role of the frail, dying patriarch to absolute perfection. His face was pale, his eyes half closed, drawn into a mask of deep, agonizing suffering. Sylvia was sitting on the edge of the floral sofa, clutching a crumpled tissue to her chest. Her eyes red and puffy from what I knew were hours of strategically staged crying. Aunt Beatrice stood rigidly by the brick fireplace. Her arms were crossed tightly over her expensive cashmere sweater. Her eyes narrowed with pure, unadulterated contempt. Uncle Oscar sat on the large leather ottoman, his massive, calloused hands resting heavily on his knees, projecting an aura of immense disappointment and physical threat. And tucked away in the far corner, sitting on a hard wooden folding chair that looked incredibly uncomfortable, was Clara, Damon's girlfriend. She was 7 months pregnant. She looked incredibly small, exhausted, and utterly terrified. Her hands rested protectively over her swollen belly, her eyes darting nervously around the room. The tension in the room was so incredibly thick you could practically choke on it. The moment I stepped onto the living room carpet, every single pair of eyes locked onto me. Nobody offered a warm greeting. Nobody asked to take my wet coat. Nobody offered me a glass of water. Aunt Beatrice was the very first person to break the silence. She always was. "You have an unbelievable amount of nerve showing your face in this house, Julian," she spat, her voice dripping with pure venom. "Walking in here in your expensive corporate suit after putting your own flesh and blood in a concrete cage with actual criminals." "Hello to you too, Beatrice," I said calmly, completely ignoring her vitriol. I did not sit down. I walked directly to the center of the room, standing firmly between the large television and the heavy oak coffee table. I set the heavy leather briefcase down on the solid wood table. The loud thud echoed in the quiet room. Victor shifted in his recliner, letting out a sharp, dramatic groan as if merely moving his arm caused him unspeakable agony. "Sit down, Julian," he commanded. His voice was intentionally weak, raspy, and full of manufactured pain. "We are going to fix this horrific mess tonight. You are going to pull your phone out, call the district attorney right now on speakerphone. You are going to tell him you made a terrible, emotional mistake. You are going to say you simply forgot you lent Damon the car." I looked down at the man who had stolen my college fund, the man who had lied to my face time and time again. "No," I said smoothly, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "I am absolutely not doing that." "Do it right now," Sylvia wailed, dramatically throwing her crumpled tissue onto the floor and pressing her hands to her face. "Think of the innocent baby. Think of poor Clara. Do you want your own nephew to be born while his father is locked away in a state prison? Have you no heart at all? You are a monster." I looked over at Clara. She flinched under Sylvia's loud, piercing voice, shrinking even further into the folding chair, looking like she wanted to disappear entirely. "I am the only person in this entire room actually thinking about Clara and the safety of that baby," I said, my voice incredibly steady and cold. "That is exactly why I am standing here tonight." Uncle Oscar leaned forward, his heavy brow furrowing deeply. He was a highly observant man in the business world, and he was the very first person in the room to sense that the power dynamic was entirely off. I was not looking at the floor in shame. I was not trembling under their collective gaze. I was looking down at them with the cold, calculating eyes of a man who held all the cards. "What is your sick game here, Julian?" Oscar asked, his deep voice rumbling like thunder in the small room. "Your father is physically sick. Your mother is a total wreck. You made a rash, angry decision over a piece of metal. Be a man. Drop the felony charges, get your brother out of that cell, and handle this quietly within the family. We do not involve the law in Rossi family business." "I am not here to negotiate a settlement, Oscar," I announced, looking around the room, making sure I made direct eye contact with every single person. "I am not here to apologize, and I am absolutely not here to drop a single charge against Damon. I am here to show you exactly who Damon is, and I am here to show everyone in this room exactly who Victor and Sylvia are." Don't you dare disrespect your parents in my presence, Beatrice shouted, taking an aggressive step forward from the fireplace. We have spent hours discussing your absolute selfishness. We know exactly how much money you make. We know your salary. You have prime real estate. You have a massive 401k. You just got a huge promotion. And you want to completely destroy your brother's life over a stupid joyride. It wasn't a joyride, I said, unzipping the heavy leather briefcase. The metallic sound of the zipper cut through the room. I was about to show them that complacency is the most dangerous trap a liar can fall into. I reached deep into the briefcase and pulled out the 3 massive, heavily tabbed binders I had meticulously prepared that morning. I dropped them onto the center of the oak coffee table one by one. Bam, bam, bam. The sheer physical weight of the evidence made the table visibly shake. I picked up the first binder. The red binder. Let's start with the lies we tell each other just to keep the peace, I said, looking directly at my mother. Sylvia's eyes widened in genuine panic, and she pressed her back hard against the floral sofa cushions, realizing this was not the intervention she had planned. Mom, I said, keeping my tone deadly level and perfectly articulate. Tell Uncle Oscar and Aunt Beatrice exactly why you are currently driving a cheap rental car. Tell them what is actually wrong with your sedan. It is in the shop, Sylvia stammered, her voice shaking as she looked frantically at Victor for support. The transmission failed unexpectedly. I told you this on the phone weeks ago. You are a liar, I said clearly. The word hung in the air, heavy and completely unforgiving. I opened the red binder and flipped directly to the first neon-tabbed page. I pulled out a high-resolution, full-color photograph provided by the police report and dropped it onto the table directly in front of Oscar. It was a picture of Sylvia's sedan. The entire front end was crushed inward like a discarded aluminum soda can. The windshield was completely shattered into a spiderweb of glass. The airbags were deployed and stained. It was a total catastrophic loss. Damon was driving her car 3 weeks ago, I explained to the room, completely ignoring Sylvia's sudden, sharp gasp of horror. He was heavily intoxicated. He ran a solid red light at 45 miles an hour and completely rear-ended a family minivan. And because Damon has an extensive criminal record and a suspended license, he is legally listed as an excluded driver on her insurance policy. Prime Mutual Insurance denied the claim entirely. I pulled out the official lawsuit filing from the county clerk's office and slid it next to the crash photo. They are currently suing Sylvia personally for $14,500 in property damages due to subrogation. She does not have a car in the shop. She is effectively bankrupt. And that is exactly why Victor was so incredibly eager to hand Damon the keys to my Porsche. They desperately needed a replacement vehicle, and they were perfectly willing to let him drive my asset completely uninsured. If he crashed my car, my insurance would deny the claim, and I would be the one facing a massive lawsuit. I would be the one financially ruined to protect his secret. Uncle Oscar picked up the thick legal document. His face turned a deep, furious shade of red as he scanned the legal text. He looked sharply at Victor. You lied to me? Oscar growled, his hands clenching into fists. You asked me for a massive personal loan last week for emergency roof repairs. Was it for this lawsuit? Don't listen to him, Oscar, Victor shouted, his fake weakness vanishing instantly. He sat up completely straight in his recliner, pointing a shaking, rage-filled finger at me. He is twisting the facts. Damon made a mistake. We are a family. We protect our own blood. Protecting your own? I laughed. A harsh, bitter sound that held zero humor. I picked up the blue binder and turned my attention directly to Clara. Clara, I said gently, deliberately softening my voice so as not to scare her further. They told you he was driving my car to a highly important job interview, right? They told you he needed to look like a successful regional manager to secure a future for your child. Clara nodded slowly, heavy tears welling up in her eyes and spilling over her cheeks. He put on a suit. He told me he was going to secure a high salary with full medical benefits for the baby. He lied to you, Clara. They all lied to you. They have been lying to you since the day you met him. I opened the blue binder and pulled out a large, fold-out sheet of paper. It was the GPS tracking data from my Porsche, blown up to poster size at the print shop. I laid it over the insurance documents on the table. This is the unalterable satellite tracking data downloaded directly from the car's onboard computer system, I explained, pointing to the highlighted timestamps. He left this house at 6:15 p.m. The supposed interview was at 7 p.m. in Bellevue. He never went north to Bellevue. He drove south. I traced the thick red line on the map with my index finger. He stopped at a rundown liquor store on 88th Street. He bought a bottle of cheap tequila. And then he got directly back onto the highway headed straight for the reservation casino. He was not going to get a job to support you. He was going to gamble away whatever cash he had left in his pockets. No, Clara sobbed, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. He swore to me. He swore on the baby's life he stopped gambling months ago. He stole the cash from your purse, didn't he? I asked, watching her carefully, knowing the patterns of an addict. Clara looked up, her face crumbling in absolute devastation. My portion of the rent money. He said he took it to put a cash deposit down on a crib at a boutique downtown. There is no crib, Clara, I said, my heart breaking for her naivety. And there is absolutely no job. That is enough, Victor roared. He stood up violently from his recliner, entirely forgetting about his supposedly injured arm, throwing the sling off. He was furious, his face purple with unbridled rage. Get out of my house. You are completely destroying this family. You are a cold, calculating machine. You care more about pieces of legal paper and bank accounts than you do about your own blood. I am the only one keeping this family out of absolute poverty. I shot back, stepping closer to him, refusing to back down a single inch. I paid your electric bill last month, Dad. I paid for your premium health insurance so you wouldn't lose coverage. And how do you repay me? I reached into the briefcase one last time. I pulled out the black binder. This was the absolute kill shot. This was the moment I had prepared for my entire life. You think this is just about a joyride, Oscar? I asked, looking dead at my uncle. You think this is just about Sylvia's car crash? It is so much worse. I opened the black binder. I pulled out a thick stack of bank statements from the joint account. 2 years ago, Victor convinced me to open a joint emergency bank account. I put $5,000 in it strictly for medical emergencies. 3 weeks ago, he drained every single cent of it. He needed it for his expensive heart medication. Beatrice yelled from the fireplace, desperately trying to defend him. No, Beatrice, he did not. I corrected her sharply. I laid the official bank transfer receipt on the table. He wired the entire $5,000 directly to King County bail bonds. Damon was arrested again for possession, and Victor looted my emergency fund to keep him out of jail. The room went deadly silent. Beatrice stared at the receipt, her mouth hanging slightly open, the realization finally hitting her. But that is still not the worst part, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying, absolute calm. I reached into the back pocket of the black binder. I pulled out a heavily notarized legal document. I had paid my corporate lawyer a massive premium fee to pull this during expedited financial discovery that very morning. I slammed it down onto the center of the coffee table. I ran a full, deep-dive credit check on myself this morning, I announced to the silent room. And I found a massive anomaly. Victor did not just steal $5,000. Damon owed $30,000 to a very dangerous loan shark operating out of Tacoma. A man named Vinny. Victor's face went completely, ghostly white. All the blood drained from his features. He stumbled back a half step, hitting the edge of his recliner, his legs giving out. Victor went to Vinny to save his golden child, I continued, making sure every person in the room heard every single syllable clearly. But Victor has terrible credit. He has absolutely no assets. So, Victor forged my signature on a legally binding loan document. He used my name, my excellent credit score, and my social security number to secure a $30,000 predatory loan. Sylvia gasped loudly, covering her mouth in pure horror. Even she did not know the depths of his depravity. And do you want to know what Victor listed as the physical collateral for that loan? I asked the room. I pointed directly at Victor's pale, sweating face. He listed my Porsche 911. The debt is due next week. If he doesn't pay, they come for the car. That is exactly why Victor gave Damon the keys. They were not going to an interview. Damon was driving my car to the casino to hand it over to a loan shark to pay off his drug debts. My father stole my identity, forged my signature, and tried to hand my $130,000 car over to criminals. The silence in the living room was absolute. It was a suffocating, heavy, toxic silence. The sheer gravity of the felony fraud hung in the air like thick smoke. I had not just exposed a lie. I had exposed a massive, calculated, entirely unforgivable financial betrayal. I stood perfectly still in the center of the living room, watching the absolute destruction of Victor's carefully crafted facade. He could not speak. He was staring at the forged loan document on the coffee table as if it were a venomous snake about to strike him. His chest heaved, but the fake heart attack routine was completely gone. This was genuine, undeniable panic. I turned my attention to Uncle Oscar. I fully expected him to explode in anger at his brother. Oscar prided himself on integrity, hard work, and building a legitimate business. I expected him to throw Victor out of his own house for committing felony fraud against a family member. Instead, the third, most unexpected twist of the knife came from the man I thought might actually understand the gravity of the situation. Uncle Oscar slowly reached out and picked up the loan document. He read the forged signature. He looked at the staggering predatory interest rate at the bottom of the page. Then he set the paper down, sighed heavily, rubbed his temples, and looked directly at me. "Julian," Oscar said, his voice low, calculating, and purely transactional. "This is very, very bad. This is felony fraud. If this document gets out to the authorities, Victor goes to federal prison for a minimum of 5 years. The family name will be dragged entirely through the mud. Your mother will be destitute. It will be in all the local papers. He deserves to go to prison," I stated firmly, not backing down. "He stole my identity." "Listen to me," Oscar interrupted, holding up a massive hand to silence me. "You are a very successful young man. Beatrice is right about that. You just got a major promotion. You make an incredible salary. You own prime real estate. You can easily absorb a $30,000 hit without going bankrupt." I stared at him in pure, unfiltered disbelief. My jaw actually tightened so hard my teeth ground together. "Excuse me? I am saying you need to pay the debt," Oscar demanded, his tone shifting completely from a concerned uncle to a mob enforcer protecting the syndicate. "You need to pay this loan shark, clear the title on your car, and bury this paperwork permanently. You do not turn your father over to the police. You swallow your pride, you pay the money, and you protect the family name. Think of your future in this family. Think of your eventual inheritance when we pass." I let out a sharp, genuine laugh. It echoed loudly and bitterly in the tense room. "My inheritance?" I asked mockingly, staring at Oscar as if he had lost his mind. "What inheritance, Oscar? Are you delusional? A mountain of hidden credit card debt? A heavily mortgaged house they are about to lose to an insurance lawsuit? There is absolutely no inheritance here. There is only a massive black hole of financial ruin. And you want me to throw my hard-earned money into it just to save his fragile ego and your precious family reputation. You are a Rossi." Beatrice shrieked from the fireplace, joining Oscar's side, her face twisted in anger. "You owe us your absolute loyalty. We raised you. We put a roof over your head when you were a child. I owe you absolutely nothing," I said, my voice turning into a low, dangerous growl. "I bought my own clothes since I was 15. I paid my own college tuition by scrubbing toilets and flipping burgers. I built my own career while you people sat around protecting a violent criminal. I am not paying a single dime of this forged loan. I have already forwarded this entire file to my corporate lawyer and the financial fraud division of the police department. It is out of my hands. Victor is on his own. You selfish little bastard, Victor hissed, finally finding his voice. He took a threatening step toward me, his fists clenched, spit flying from his lips. I am your father. I gave you life, and I am taking mine back, I replied, not flinching, staring him down until he stopped in his tracks. Before Victor could take another step, a loud, scraping sound broke the intense standoff. Clara stood up from the wooden folding chair. She was trembling violently, tears streaming continuously down her pale face, but her jaw was set incredibly tight. She walked slowly over to the coffee table and looked down at the GPS maps, the insurance lawsuit, and the forged loan document. Clara, honey, Sylvia said nervously, reaching a hand out, her voice trembling. Please sit down. It is bad for the baby to be stressed. We will fix this. Damon loves you so much. He is just troubled right now. Do not touch me, Clara said, her voice shaking but surprisingly loud and authoritative. She looked directly at Victor, her eyes burning with a sudden, fierce realization. You told me the bruise on his knuckles was from working on his car engine. Victor swallowed hard, suddenly looking away, unable to meet a pregnant woman's eyes. Clara turned to me, her voice breaking. Damon didn't get that bruise working on a car. He got it when he shoved me hard into the drywall last week because I refused to hand over my debit card for his gambling. A collective gasp echoed in the room. Beatrice covered her mouth in genuine shock. I wanted to leave, Clara sobbed, wrapping her arms protectively around her pregnant belly. But Victor told me to stay quiet. He told me Damon was just stressed about providing for the baby. He told me Rossi men have bad tempers and I needed to learn to de-escalate situations. He told me I would be a terrible, selfish mother if I broke up a family over a little push. My grip on the handle of the briefcase tightened until my leather gloves creaked loudly. The financial theft was infuriating, but this was pure, unadulterated evil. They were actively, consciously enabling the physical abuse of a pregnant woman just to keep up appearances and keep Damon out of trouble. That is a complete lie, Sylvia shrieked, lunging forward off the sofa, entirely losing her mind. You are hysterical. You cannot leave. That is my grandson. He belongs to this family. You are not taking him away from us. Sylvia reached out aggressively, trying to grab Clara's arm to physically pull her back to the chair and trap her in the corner. I moved instantly. I stepped directly between my mother and Clara, using my height and broad shoulders as a solid, immovable physical barricade. Do not ever touch her, I commanded, my voice echoing like thunder in the living room, projecting every ounce of authority I possessed. If you take one more step toward her, Sylvia, I will call Officer Ramirez back here right now and have you arrested for assault and battery. You know I will do it without a second thought. Sylvia recoiled instantly as if she had been burned by fire. She backed up, tripping clumsily over the edge of the area rug, and fell back onto the sofa, weeping loudly and uncontrollably. I turned my back on them and looked at Clara. Grab your coat. We are leaving right now. Clara didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second. She grabbed her purse and her heavy winter coat. She walked toward the front door, stepping over the threshold without looking back at the people who had tried to destroy her. I picked up my leather briefcase, packed with all the undeniable evidence that would soon dismantle their lives completely. I turned around to face my family one final time. Victor was standing by his recliner. He looked old. He looked entirely defeated. The patriarchal power he had wielded for decades was shattered on the floor. But his toxic ego still demanded the very last word. If you walk out that door with her, Julian, Victor spat, his voice trembling with impotent, pathetic rage. You have no father. You are dead to me. You hear me? I looked at the man who had stolen my money, forged my name, enabled an abuser, and tried to completely ruin my future. I haven't had a father in over 10 years, I said coldly. I just had a financial dependent. Goodbye, Victor. I walked out the front door and closed it firmly behind me. The heavy, metallic click of the latch sounded exactly like a prison door locking them inside their own miserable, self-inflicted lives. The icy rain outside felt incredibly refreshing against my skin. It smelled of wet asphalt, pine needles, and pure, unfiltered freedom. Clara was sitting in the passenger seat of my rental car, shivering from the cold and crying silently into her hands. I put the heavy briefcase in the trunk, got into the driver's seat, and cranked the heat up high to warm her up. We drove away from the manicured cul-de-sac, the fake colonial houses fading into the rearview mirror, and we did not look back once. "Where are we going?" Clara asked softly, wiping her eyes with her damp sleeve. "I am taking you to a safe, high-end hotel downtown for tonight. My treat," I said, keeping my eyes focused on the dark road ahead. "Tomorrow morning, I am going to help you hire the most ruthless family law attorney in Seattle. We are going to file for a strict protective order against Damon and Victor, and we are going to secure absolute sole custody of your baby before he is even born. They will never, ever touch you or him again. They will fight me," she whispered, terrified of the people she had just escaped. "Victor said they have expensive family lawyers." I smiled grimly, the neon lights of the city reflecting in my eyes. "They have absolutely no money, Clara. They have a massive insurance lawsuit pending, a violent loan shark breathing down their neck, and multiple felony fraud charges about to drop on Victor's head. They have zero leverage. We have the absolute truth, we have the documentation, and we have the funding to fight them into the ground." The next 3 months were an absolute blur of intense legal bureaucracy, depositions, and court hearings, but for the very first time in my entire life, I navigated a crisis without an ounce of fear or lingering guilt. Damon did not get bail. Between the grand theft auto, driving on a suspended license, the prior felony DUI warrant, and the new information regarding his debts, the judge deemed him an extreme flight risk. He sat in a cold county jail cell awaiting trial. Eventually, faced with the mountain of undeniable evidence I provided, including the GPS tracking logs and his arrogant confession at the liquor store, his overworked public defender forced him to take a strict plea deal. He was sentenced to 2 full years in state prison with mandatory anger management classes, random drug testing, and 3 years of incredibly strict probation upon his release. Victor and Sylvia's carefully constructed house of cards collapsed entirely, turning to dust. The subrogation lawsuit from Prime Mutual Insurance went through successfully. To pay the crushing $15,000 judgment, and to pay off the terrifying loan shark Victor had foolishly entangled himself with to avoid having his legs broken, they were forced to rapidly sell their beautiful colonial home at a massive loss. They downsized to a cramped, depressing 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown town 30 miles away from their country club friends. The fraud division investigated Victor. He narrowly avoided prison time only because I agreed to a civil settlement where he surrendered whatever microscopic assets he had left, effectively ruining his credit forever. Uncle Oscar and Aunt Beatrice stopped talking to them completely. Oscar could not handle the public humiliation of the forged loan and the criminal charges associated with the Rossi name. The shunning within the extended family was absolute. Without their captive audience and their favorite financial scapegoat, Victor and Sylvia simply withered away into irrelevance. At my corporate firm, the rumor mill had inevitably churned. My boss, Harrison, a serious, high-level executive who did not tolerate personal drama, called me into his expansive corner office overlooking the Seattle skyline. I walked in fully expecting a severe reprimand or even a termination for the legal circus surrounding my life. Instead, Harrison gestured for me to sit and poured me a cup of expensive, pour-over coffee. "I heard through the legal department about the identity fraud case involving your father," Harrison said, leaning against his massive mahogany desk, analyzing me. "I saw the meticulous paperwork you filed to secure your assets and lock down your credit. I deeply apologize if it has been a distraction to the firm, sir," I said formally, keeping my posture rigid. "Don't apologize," Harrison interrupted, holding up a hand to stop me. "I review complex risk management profiles all day, Julian. You identified a massive, catastrophic personal liability, You gathered undeniable empirical evidence. You executed a flawless defensive strategy, and you completely neutralized the threat to your portfolio without letting sentimentality or emotion cloud your judgment. That is exactly the kind of ruthless, clinical efficiency I need at the executive level. He handed me a thick manila folder. It was the official corporate paperwork for my promotion to Senior Director of Risk Management, complete with a massive bump in my base salary, a corner office, and full stock options. I had finally found an environment that respected my boundaries, valued my logic, and rewarded my hard work, instead of punishing me for being successful. 10 days after the dramatic arrest at the liquor barn, the police department officially released my Porsche 911 from the evidence impound lot. I took the afternoon off and drove it straight to Gus. Gus was an old-school, meticulous automotive restoration expert who ran a high-end detailing shop on the industrial edge of town. Gus walked slowly around the car, inspecting the smudge of cigarette ash on the hood and smelling the faint, lingering odor of stale tequila and cheap tobacco inside the cabin. He shook his head in absolute disgust. Someone didn't respect the machine, Julian. This is a crime. I want everything completely purged. Gus, I told him, handing him the keys. I want the carpets heavily shampooed and extracted. I want the premium leather conditioned twice. I want a full ozone treatment for the ventilation system. I want this car to look, feel, and smell like Damon never even existed. When I picked the car up 3 days later, it was absolutely flawless. The slate gray paint gleamed perfectly in the afternoon sun, looking like liquid glass. The awful smell of smoke was entirely gone, replaced by the crisp, rich scent of new leather and absolute freedom. I drove home. I parked the Porsche precisely in the center of my driveway. I looked at the spot where the dark oil stain used to be. I had spent 2 grueling hours on my hands and knees scrubbing it away with an industrial degreaser and a wire brush until the concrete was clean again. It was hard work, but it was my work, and it cleaned my property. Later that evening, I sat on my front porch with a hot cup of black coffee, watching the sunset over the quiet, peaceful suburb. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't my parents. I had blocked their numbers permanently, and the restraining order Clara and I filed kept them physically and legally far away. It was a text message from Clara. Attached was a high-resolution picture of a beautiful, perfectly healthy newborn baby boy wrapped in a soft blue hospital blanket, sleeping soundly. Text: Meet Leo. He is perfectly healthy. We are safe in our new apartment. The custody papers went through completely. Thank you for everything, Uncle Julian. I smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached my eyes for the first time in a very long time. Uncle Julian. I really liked the sound of that. It sounded like family. A real family, built on respect, not extortion. I had lost a brother to the prison system. I had lost my parents to their own toxic greed and manipulation. I had lost the entire illusion of a biological safety net. But I had kept my hard-earned dignity. I had aggressively protected my financial future. And most importantly, I had helped save a vulnerable mother and her innocent child from an endless, generational cycle of abuse and theft that would have completely destroyed them. I took a sip of my coffee. Tasted like absolute, undeniable victory. Some people will always tell you that family is everything. They will tell you that you should forgive any transgression, any theft, and any abuse simply because you share the exact same blood. But I learned the most expensive, valuable lesson of my entire life that rainy Tuesday night. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, especially when they are the ones holding the gasoline and the matches. You have to draw a hard line, protect your assets, and walk away. So, now I have to ask all of you watching this. Was I too harsh? Should I have paid the $30,000, dropped the felony charges, and let my brother destroy my car and his girlfriend's life just to keep the peace at Thanksgiving? Or did I finally do exactly what needed to be done to break the cycle? Have you ever faced something similar with your own toxic family members? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journey. Thank you for listening.